next talk will be about the fuel that drives that engine. Josh Daniels is the head of funding at DOW Foundation. You may have heard about the $800 million ecosystem funds news that was dropped recently. He is the person with the keys to those funds, and he will be discussing founders and funding in his talk. Please welcome Josh to the stage.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I don't know if those keys work every day, but we'll see. But yeah, as was mentioned, I head up the funding team here at NEAR, and today really going to talk about sort of how we have now started to build out a funding platform that ultimately is supporting founders. Basically, here's kind of a quick agenda of what I'm hoping to cover. Would really love to leave some time for Q&A in the room if anyone have questions. But basically, the goal of this session is really to give clarity to everyone, both here in Lisbon as well as in the Nearverse, understanding of what are the funding options within the ecosystem and how best to engage with us in order to capture that funding. So let's start first with sort of defining what the funding platform is, because that's a pretty nebulous term. So here's really kind of how we think about it, is that the foundation ultimately is focused on providing capital and support to projects at varying stages of growth and development within the ecosystem. Obviously, as Todd and others have mentioned, we're fairly early on in the development of the ecosystem, given Mainnet's been online for a little over a year. But for us, we see projects accelerating in growth and building, raising capital externally, launching a mainnet, touching tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of users, and we want to make sure our funding options meet them where they are in terms of what capital they need, what support they need, and what guidance they need. And really the funding platform is about developing those tools and channels to support them as they grow. So we launched our funding efforts in February this past year, and so really want to start out by giving a bit of a background on our MVP funding program, our minimal viable product program that has been running for the last 6 or so months. So this program, as I mentioned, was launched in February of 2021. It was really a community effort within the ecosystem with folks from a lot of our core teams, DevRel, our operations team, our infrastructure team. Really was an all hands on deck approach. And the goal was really to stand up our grants program, which is really non-equity capital that we give to projects that are bootstrapping and developing within the ecosystem. To date, we've deployed $45 million to, I think at this point now, we're over 130 projects year to date. And that's going to sort of today. So it's really been quite a bit of an acceleration in growth and focus in terms of projects. We also were able to launch our Fast Grants program this past quarter. And I'll go in a little bit of the details there. But ultimately, the goal of that program is really to provide grant support to projects very quickly. One of the things we've heard throughout the Web3 ecosystem is that the time it takes from applying to a grant or inquiring about a grant is usually quite long. It can be sort of 3 to 6 months. And one of the things we're constantly focused on in the NEAR ecosystem is shortening that time. And our Fast Grants program is really core to that. Here are a few highlights of some grants we've given out to date, which really kind of show the diversity of projects that we're focused on, and also both in terms of sort of sector and focus, but then also in terms of where they're at in sort of development stage. So you have Tri-Solaris here, who's deployed on Aurora. It's a centralized exchange. L'Equality, which recently raised a $7 million round for a cross-blockchain wallet. And so obviously they're developing quite mature in terms of their growth comparatively to some of these other projects. Croncat, which is a crowd favorite and is really focused on bringing dev tools and support within the ecosystem, and then Kurtosis, which has been partnering quite well with our platform team and some of our core engineers as they're building out testing environments. So really you can see here there's quite a diversity of projects, and in the grant size and support, it varies across all of these. So you can see here, this is important to note, is that we've had a 400% growth rate in committed capital to grants from Q2 to Q3. So you can see here some of the projects that are highlighted are ones that have received grants. This definitely does not include all of them, but one of the really things we're focused on is, again, that speed of deployment and the amount of capital we can deploy across all of those projects. So at this point, we've really realized that we are ready to move from our minimum viable stage into our funding platform stage, which is really around, again, showing those channels of support that exist for projects to really capture funding within the ecosystem. And one of the core pieces of that, as mentioned before, is our $800 million global ecosystem fund that was announced earlier this week. And it's really a focus around giving the ecosystem sort of the fuel that they need to build and grow and scale. So I'm going to break this announcement down a little bit for folks so they can kind of understand the pieces here. So $250 million of that is going to go to our NEAR grants program. And so as I mentioned before, this is really around non-equity capital going directly to support new and existing projects and teams in the ecosystem. So NEAR Knots, for example, is a project that Todd and Mark mentioned, is an exact type of program where there's an idea, there's a small team that wants to really experiment and develop that, and we want to support them as they ultimately build and grow and sort of put out that alpha or MVP of that solution. The next is our startup grants pool, and this is really around us decentralizing our grants capital to support other up-and-coming growing projects across the ecosystem as they're looking to deploy capital to projects that are more related to their strategy. So here you can think about us giving a sizable amount, roughly around the $5 million range in tokens, to projects to ultimately stand up their own grants program. So again, it really kind of decentralizes our focus and gives people the ability to provide capital there. The next is our regional ecosystem funds. These funds are really going to be focused around various hubs within various parts of the world where we want to basically support projects in sort of the NEAR ecosystem that's developing more in a concentrated fashion in those regions. So Lisbon will be one of those areas, as you can see with a lot of the activity we've had here over the last few days. And the last one, which I know Kendall spoke about yesterday, is Proximity Labs DeFi-focused DAO. So Proximity Labs, which is a separate entity from the foundation, but again is very core and deep in our ecosystem, is focused on bringing great projects both from other ecosystems into the NEAR ecosystem, but then also basically incubating and developing DeFi projects from scratch to build natively on NEAR. So here we're going to talk about sort of what are the funding platform channels. And right now, the best way to describe them is they fall into four particular areas. The first is the grants program, DOW Funding, direct investment, and then our venture capital network. And so I'll go into each of these specifically so you can understand the details. First, we'll talk about the grants program. The grants program, as I mentioned before, is around bootstrapping high-quality projects within the NEAR ecosystem, primarily with NEAR tokens. We also give out grants in stablecoins and fiat, but focus on NEAR to really support their growth. We have two sort of channels that we focused on there as well. Our Fast Grants program, which has been mentioned before, is really around us being able to provide grant capital up to $50,000 in NEAR tokens within 2 days of us reviewing the project, engaging with them, and then filling out some very easy paperwork to ultimately satisfy that grant. Then we have our traditional grants program, which is really around any grant from $5,000 up to $250,000 in value that we look to sort of go out to the ecosystem and support projects, and also people interested in coming into the ecosystem. In order to apply for these, you can go to near.org/grants and fill out our application. For our fast grants, there's folks within our ecosystem and collective that have the ability to give those out. If you are here at NearCon, please reach out to folks at the partnership ecosystem floor at the NEAR table who can help you talk through that and provide those grants directly to your project after giving them some detail. Also, feel free to reach out to grants@near.foundation if you're interested as well. One of the other things we're really excited that we just launched late yesterday is our Refer and Earn initiative. And what this is really about is basically giving people in the ecosystem the ability to refer projects for grants and funding into the NEAR ecosystem and ultimately earn up to $10,000 in NEAR tokens. And what that really is focused on is if any of you out there know any projects that maybe are building on other chains or are at the sort of development stage, and you think they would be a great fit for Near, please reach out to us and provide those details. And then ultimately, if they do receive a grant, you'll be able to receive tokens corresponding to that grant size. We're really excited about this program. We're going to be talking about it a lot more throughout the rest of the conference and then beyond. So keep an eye out for that. So just wanted to kind of quickly touch here on sort of where are the areas of focus for us as it relates to the grants program. And this is not inclusive of everything. We are very open to all ideas coming in, but these are the ones that are really a focus for us right now. So infrastructure tools and features, so you can think of this such as wallets, on-ramp, off-ramp solutions, things of that sort. Any and all Aurora integrations. We really are focused on supporting the Aurora team as they're standing up the bridge and having teams integrate. So Tri-Solaris was a perfect example of that type of grant and team. Native products and projects focus on ecosystem development. So again, this is around games, any type of NFT projects or creative endeavors. All of those kind of fall into this bucket. We're also focused on marketplaces, especially around NFTs. So any types of opportunities that may relate to a particular type of creative art or modality of art or in a particular region. We have several projects like that already that we're funding and excited about. And the last one is educational content programs and initiatives. So we have an education team here. Shashi is, I know, all around the event and others, but we're really focused on anyone developing content related to giving people guidance around the Near ecosystem in a broad way or directly around Rust, providing support both in grants and then also advisory around those opportunities. So next we're going to talk about DOW funding. So DOW funding is a fairly new one for us, and it relates to Sputnik DAO V2 and Astro DAO launching. So with these two launching, and as Jordan had mentioned before, we have 200 plus currently DAOs that are in our ecosystem, with 100 of those or so being active on a monthly basis. And one of the things we really are now focusing on is investing directly into those DAOs and really kind of giving those teams the capital they need to start to foster their community and sort of move against their various strategies. And so both the funding and community teams work together to review those proposals and make sure that all of those DAOs are receiving support. And one of the things that we're really excited about is not just necessarily investing in DAOs that are natively built on Near, but also looking at DAOs and other ecosystems that we want to support that ultimately we can see some cross-pollination or some projects that can really sort of traverse across. So we're really excited about that. And here, the focus is submit your proposals in the Near form. There's a how-to guide here with the link, so in the Nearverse, definitely reach out there. But if you want to sort of talk through this directly, I know David from our community team is here floating around, and he'll be upstairs to talk about, as well as members of our ecosystem success team. So we're really excited about this and ultimately want to support DAOs as they grow and scale in our ecosystem. The next one I'll touch on briefly is direct investment. And the way to think about this is that the foundation, as we saw before with the $800 million ecosystem fund, wants to take a portion of that capital and invest directly in projects from an equity funding standpoint. So you can think about this as basically the foundation acting as a venture capital investor. One of the important things to note is that we're a passive investor. For us, it's really around creating those strategic relationships with projects that are either building natively on Near or working on projects that ultimately we want to make sure stay connected to our ecosystem. And we see our funding team in this sort of channel as a way to provide that support and really keep those ties remaining strong. So any projects that you're interested in exploring this, please reach out to grants@near.foundation, and we'll follow up to discuss directly. The next and last one is our venture capital network. So for this is really ties quite closely to our ecosystem success team, which presented just now. And the focus here is that we have a pretty strong network of venture capital firms that are already actively engaged in the ecosystem, interested in reviewing and meeting projects, and we really want to continue to cultivate those relationships. So right now we have over 85 VCs that we're actively in dialogue with, and have come and engaged with projects on a regular basis. And what we really want to do is make sure that projects that are building on NEAR or engaged in our ecosystem are able to work with those VCs at the right time when they're ready to raise capital. So we're really focused on providing those introductions, giving support to these teams as they're developing pitch materials, and ultimately putting them in a position to succeed as they're raising funding externally. One of the things we're really focused on is helping our projects get to that next stage. As was noted before by Ilya, and I'm sure Eric will talk about it a bit later today, we've had projects in our ecosystem raise over $50 million already with only 1 year on mainnet in terms of external funding. And we have many more announcements coming soon. So we're very much excited about this as a goal for our ecosystem. And ultimately, this is a joint effort between the funding team and our ecosystem success team. That is it. Hopefully that was helpful talking through our channels and giving you all some ways to directly reach out to us, engage, but happy to answer any questions if anyone has in the room.
You talked about the FAST grants. I'm on the ecosystem success team, so I'm familiar with it. But I was curious, since we've been here for about 2 days, are FAST grants actually happening here,
Yes.
while you're networking?
Yes, it's actually, I was reviewing that this past evening, and we've had a couple dozen grants go out already since we've been here. So the activity's been great. I think there's multiple folks wearing NearCon shirts or who are members of our community that are already talking to projects and sort of providing grants. And for us, it's really, again, around sort of that distributed focus. We don't want the foundation to be sort of the go-between for all of these grants. We want to make sure that capital is flowing actively within the ecosystem.
Can I ask one?
Please.
Are there, you said or there's a regional fund are focusing on many of its sector area fields, well, what field or what sector are you interested in or focusing on as a regional point? Right? We are a Japanese-based company and already received a grant from NEAR Foundation. And thank you so much. And and also we'd like to support more Asian activity on NEAR.
Yes, so we have a team that's based in mainland China that's been doing a lot of work. We actually had a NearCon event going on in Shanghai this week, which is well attended, and I know that there's some materials and sort of details on that have been shown on Twitter and our blog. But ultimately, that team has been sort of figuring out what are going to be those sub-regions within Asia where we'll be standing up those sort of ecosystem funds. So more to come there. We haven't decided on those specific areas yet, but if we can chat separately and sort of talk through what that looks like. But Japan has definitely been a great market for us and would love to continue to kind of do work there. So that's exciting.
Maybe we'll take one more question.
Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.